Well, I actually do think that AI can help throughout the entire process. And the way that Bullhorn is thinking about this is that you can use AI in the upfront sourcing piece, some of the stuff that we were just talking about in terms of AI screening, but also in terms of helping to write good job descriptions, helping to identify what the right screening questions are going to be, performing automated screenings, creating candidate summaries, kind of all of that. And it's awesome to think that the technology can now do that matching for you. There's a lot of countervailing sort of macro trends. One of the ones that I'm kind of intrigued by is the regulatory environment for business, that when there is a loose regulatory environment for business, business grows more and then they need contract staff because they're growing too fast to be able to bring on permanent employees fast enough. And when there's a tight regulatory environment, then it's hard to bring on permanent staff without having consequences in terms of compliance, et cetera. And so people rely more on temp. So I actually think there's ways that temp can win in both scenarios.
Nina, welcome to the Staffing Ring.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is an episode, we booked this a few weeks ago, and we've had some great guests on the Staffing Ring. This is one of the highlights, I think, of our season 1. So really looking forward to, talking all things staffing, recruitment, and technology. So, lovely to have you.
Well, I've certainly been in the business long enough that I should have some insights.
I was actually looking at your LinkedIn profile here. You're coming up to 10 years at Bullhorn. So
coming up to 10 years at Bullhorn, and was in staffing before that as well. So really coming up to 20 years in staffing.
Wow. Yeah. I think let's just dive in. I think that's what we're here to get the best out of this time. So we're recording this middle of 2024. We're going into the Q4 and lots of expectations around hitting targets and setting up for next year. So it's been hard, and we're not out of all of that at the moment. What are you seeing as sort of the key factors around the environment or the pressures for staffing agencies?
It's really a strange environment because it's not like a real recession, right? I mean, we're seeing positive economic indicators overall, but it's definitely a staffing recession. So it's like, well, why is there a mismatch between what we're seeing in the staffing industry and what we're seeing in the overall economy? And not the overall economy is growing leaps and bounds, but it's pretty stable to growing. And yet staffing is not reflecting that reality. We do a staffing industry indicator with SIA, where we use our hourly data from our time clocks to really get an indication of what's happening in the staffing industry by segment. And what we're seeing is maybe a little bit of a rebound in light industrial staffing, which is usually a leading indicator of the overall industry, but not as much of a tick up in healthcare or IT. And what we're really seeing is for healthcare and IT kind of being below, up to 30% below where we were at the height of COVID, and IT being down as well. And obviously, we spent a fair amount of time thinking about that, talking about that. Is this a general trend, an underlying trend? Is this a cyclical trend? Kind of what's happening, and where's the disconnect with the overall economy? And I think the biggest piece is around uncertainty. I think staffing does particularly well in times of uncertainty, whether that is a time of contraction or a time of growth. When there's uncertainty, people, even in the face of demand, might say, I'm going to meet that demand with contract rather than meeting that demand with permanent employees because I don't know what the future holds. So we saw that in spades with the COVID crisis, where there was demand and people were nervous to meet that demand with full-time employees because they weren't sure if the world was ending, right? I mean, it was like we didn't know where this was going and if this was going to be, multiple years, 1 year, 6 months, what was happening. And certainly we saw in healthcare staffing, huge growth during that period where, people just needed to get bodies in jobs and qualified people helping to care for those who were ill. So now with the stability and flatness, people are feeling more confident to bring on full-time employees. But we actually just did a little bit of research with not our customers, but our customers' customers, and found that actually underlying the major employers are thinking that they're going to be relying more on contractors in the future. And we're not seeing, the kind of underlying trend that would be a real concern. So overall at Bullhorn, we're optimistic. We don't know what the timing is going to look like, but we are optimistic that there's going to be either a snapback or a slow bounce back, and we just don't know.
Sure. Yeah. And I think, the point about, industries and sectors having a different cadence of emergence from the tough, the challenging times we've had is, certainly very relevant for a lot of agencies who are specific to, oil and gas or manufacturing or IT. How do you think agencies should be thinking about what are the signals for when it's right to then start recruiting additional headcount or bringing on new technology to help, scale the agency? You don't want to go too early because then you're going to be kind of short on cash and revenue and cash flow, but you don't want to actually also miss the wave of that next, staffing cycle.
Yeah. And I think those two questions of when do you bring on more people and when do you add technology are actually pretty different from one another. And I wouldn't necessarily put them in lockstep. What we are seeing is an interest in adding technology, maybe a little bit in advance of adding the people that are underlying sort of the trend in the number of recruiters in the industry is going down more than the trend in terms of technology investment. We are seeing a lot of agencies being interested in looking at new technology, at what AI is going to bring, at different kinds of both sales technologies and candidate engagement technologies, and seeing them lean into the technology piece a little bit more than the staff piece. And I think being flexible on staff levels is one of the things that the staffing industry is best at, kind of using trend data to really know when to bring on more recruiters is something that I think that the agencies have really honed over years and years and years of cyclicality and growth and knowing how to adapt to that.
And are you seeing any, macro risks or even potentially political risks that people are maybe not factoring in their plans? Or you say, agencies are great at looking the signals. Are there any like left hooks about to come and sort of mix things up a lot for whether it's been a sector or a certain recruitment type, perm or contract?
I actually think there's a lot of countervailing sort of macro trends. One of the ones that I'm kind of intrigued by is the regulatory environment for business. That when there is a loose regulatory environment for business grows more, and then they need contract staff because they're growing too fast to be able to bring on permanent employees fast enough. And when there's a tight regulatory environment, then it's hard to bring on permanent staff without having consequences in terms of your compliance, et cetera. And so people rely more on temp. So I actually think there's ways that temp can win in both scenarios of, how conservative or liberal the government is in terms of labor regulations. But there are so many other factors that come into play when you think about what the underlying growth of the economy is, that it's sort of hard to be a economist and figure it all out.
Yes, yeah. Well, and there are so many dynamics that influence, staffing levels and rates. And one recent kind of change is, if you look at the likes of Amazon and some other big companies, are really bringing or expecting people to go back into the office. So how does that work from an agency point of view, where over the last 4 or 5 years, agencies themselves have been very much, hybrid or remote? Are they going to need to now be closer to the customer? If, Amazon, for example, are hiring a bunch of more people in the office. If San Francisco is now becoming much more of a back to the office culture. So plenty to kind of...
I don't think that we're putting the genie back in the bottle on that one for recruitment. I actually think one of the best parts about the recruitment industry is how metrics driven we are and performance driven, and the ability for managers to manage remotely, even have a real sense of what activity levels are, and to do remote coaching. As I'm sure you're very aware of, call recordings, et cetera, are really helping people to work very well in a non-office environment. And offices were always such a high percentage of the overall expenses of an agency. And I think they felt they needed to have the office in order to build the trust with the candidate and the trust with the hiring organization. But I think people are now beyond needing to see a physical office to be able to believe that someone is a legitimate business person. And there's so much more information available on how good of a recruitment organization it is, what else they work with. You can judge based on their website and on their reviews. And there's organizations like Great Recruiters that, give ratings. So you can really see what the organization that you're working with is like without having to judge it based on a physical office.
Yeah, a lot of great points. I think, certainly from a cost perspective and from, looking to get the best talent for your agency, then being flexible on location and, working styles is certainly an advantage.
And being a recruiter can often be a 24/7 job, right? Like, you want to meet the candidate when and where they're available in the channel that they're available in. So, being able to work from home enables you to take that 9 p.m., the 9 p.m. call or the 7:30 a.m. call, and just be focused on getting the results and not be worried about being in the office at particular hours.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. Right. Let's go on to round 2. So here we're talking about strategies, tactics to win. Like, how do agencies really think about going from, surviving to thriving over the next kind of 3, 6, 12 months? Are you sort of seeing any emergence of what might be considered unconventional ways that agencies are bringing on technology, deploying, AI or automation, for example?
Well, so we definitely see a swing in this industry between a focus on candidate experience and a focus on client acquisition and customer service. And I think we're swinging towards the customer acquisition side of things at the moment. But I think the really excellent firms are going to be able to maintain a focus on both simultaneously and continue to maintain a very high level of candidate experience, even as they're also focusing on the customer side of things. On the customer side of things, being able to leverage AI to look at what's happening in the industry, whether that's personnel moves. So we have a partner named Woo that tracks all of the candidates in your database and also the hiring managers. And they'll look at when someone moves from one organization to another and make sure that they're reaching out at that point when a hiring manager who's been successful at working with your firm moves to a new organization. That's a great opportunity to talk to them about what their needs might be.
Absolutely. And
so thinking about automation to do both sides of the equation, but at the same time, not losing sight of creating an amazing candidate experience with technology and making sure that candidates are having a seamless experience from their first interaction all the way through. We did some research that you really only get one shot with a candidate if they have a bad experience anywhere in the process, whether that's in the apply process or the onboarding process or follow-up and redeployment. At any point in that process, your reputation is on the line. And so leveraging technology to make sure that candidates aren't going into a black hole, to make sure that candidates are having a smooth experience and that there isn't drop-off between when you extend the offer and when they show up on their first day. Those are key points in which technology can really make a difference.
I still believe the candidate experience, yes, the client, winning clients, winning placements is number one at the moment, of course. And that's why business development's been such a hot topic. I still believe candidate experience needs to be, the game needs to be raised. And for a lot of agencies, it is difficult because, a lot of, you see on LinkedIn, roles come up and within 3 hours there's 800 applicants. So I get it. But that's where technology can come into play to really provide that automated response and at least give every applicant the impression that they, have had some engagement and some care. Because if you're a successful agency, you want to be growing next 5, 10, 20 years, and a lot of those candidates will become your clients, and that's just a natural evolution of the market.
And I love the technologies that enable the candidate to ask questions and interact right away.
Yes.
So that they're finding out the information about the requirements of the job and, particulars that might not be in that first initial posting, but are available to the chatbot or whatever it is. So to put it, another partner plug, Staffing Engine is one of our partners. They have a great website chatbot that can do screening questions and kind of do the initial qualification so that you're not having to have a recruiter spend time with a candidate who actually doesn't have the ability to work in that jurisdiction or doesn't have any experience in that particular role.
And I love both of those applications, Woo and Staffing Engine. And actually, they've both been on the Staffing Ring podcast. So for the listeners, I will drop those episodes in the show notes. So great call outs, Nina. You've got two of our most recent guests on the pod. So amazing. And when we think about AI automation, obviously it's been an incredibly, quick development of those, technologies and solutions. Running a staffing agency is hard work. Every time I speak to an agency leader or manager, they're juggling 101 or 1,001 things. How do you think they should be really compartmentalizing how to figure out the right tools and process and data hygiene, as well as managing people and clients and candidates and the whole human side of the business? So quite different strengths of a leader or manager. How do you think, or how have you seen people be successful in doing both well?
Well, I actually do think that AI can help throughout the entire process. And the way that Bullhorn is thinking about this is that you can use AI in the upfront sourcing piece, some of the stuff that we were just talking about in terms of AI screening, but also in terms of helping to write good job descriptions, helping to identify what the right screening questions are going to be, performing automated screenings, creating candidate summaries, kind of all of that upfront piece around that acquisition at the top of the funnel. And then obviously matching. I mean, when I worked a desk, you spent a lot of time combing through the database to try to identify who the right candidates would be. And yeah, you could search via keyword searches, and you could see people who had experience with a particular industry or a particular function, but you couldn't really do any kind of fuzzy searching. And you certainly didn't get served back a stacked ranked set of candidates in the exact order that you should contact them. I mean, that was a big part of what the job of the recruiter was. And it's awesome to think that the technology can now do that matching for you and come back with the ranking of who you should be talking to. So, obviously we think that's super important. Just acquired text kernel. So that's a clear lean in that direction. And actually also acquired a company called Kona Search that does sort of internal database search on the Salesforce platform. So really investing a lot in that area and AI. And then the third piece is around the submissions and kind of getting that candidate in front of the right hiring managers. And that's a big piece where we think generative AI is going to help to create that. And then underlying all of that is AI to help with the administrative tasks and to help with reminders and to, a lot of the stuff that is really time-consuming and cumbersome. I mean, I like to say nobody ever became a recruiter to send out a timesheet reminder, right? We shouldn't have to do that work, with human touch. You should be able to do that with some kind of automation and AI. And if this can all be done, informed by what we at Bullhorn call a sea of data, which is to say having something that's specific, enormous, and actionable. Right? We have hundreds of thousands of historic matches that you can use to determine what that ranking is. We're not basing that on keywords or even on just a taxonomy, but also on what actually makes a difference. And what's actually been successful. So I think that good firms are going to rely on humans to do the part that humans can do, which is creativity and empathy and emotional intelligence, and really being able to sell, right? Because that's something that, if all you're looking for is the perfect candidate to fit with the perfect rec, right, then you can use a machine to do that. But we all know that the real art of being a great recruiter is getting a candidate to take a job that isn't exactly what they were looking for, and to get a hiring manager to accept a candidate who wasn't exactly what they were looking for.
Yes.
But making the good enough match, right? And that is really something that maybe can be assisted by AI, but is truly the function of the human recruiter.
It's interesting to think. It's not something I've kind of really processed in terms of what you've just described. In terms of what's the ideal recruiter, if you're particularly if you're thinking about permanent or exec search. Are we going to be leaning much more to sort of an EQ profile as opposed to before? It was very much you had to dig through the data, and it was more of IQ, kind of like it feels like that could be perhaps a nuanced shift of those that are going to be most successful in the next few months and years.
Well, I think there was always sort of a hierarchy role in exec search, and I think that was also true for temp as well. But in exec search, right, you had people who did the research, right, and those people were combing through and doing all of this data-driven stuff where they're trying to identify potential candidates who could come in. And then there were always like those senior principals who were part of the firm whose job was really to sell, right? To kind of get the candidate excited about the role and to get the candidate pumped up for the interview and walking into that interview with the right frame of mind. And I think that role is pretty hard to do with a machine.
Yes. Right. Talking about machines, we're moving on to round 3, product innovations. Love to delve deep into the Bullhorn marketplace, and also with your role, Nina, in terms of Bullhorn Ventures, as you mentioned, with Kona Search, with Text Kernel, and the myriad of, acquisitions of the last 2 or 3 years. Are you feeling like there's a consolidation in the market, or is this really like a Bullhorn kind of led? Do you have other acquisitions or appetite for acquisitions in the next 12 months? How do you see the market?
Well, I do think that, we have moved from being really a SaaS platform with open APIs and everything was via a marketplace partner, to having more and more of the stack be provided by Bullhorn. And there are huge advantages in doing that, right? That it is, the data flows in a more unified way. There's a more unified user interface. It's designed to work together, and it is more easily configured out of the box. There's less custom work to do to make it all work seamlessly. But we never want to be a barrier to innovation. I say that all the time. And there is so much innovation in this space. We have 350 marketplace and developer partners.
Wow.
And we are looking at 30 to 50 new companies every month who write in and say that they want to become a marketplace partner, who get referred to us in some way or another. So we are constantly seeing innovation in this space. A lot of it right now is AI focused, and a lot of that is really a thin skin on generative AI. So, I'm constantly kind of counseling people who've come up with the brilliant idea that they can do submission documents in OpenAI. Like, yes, you can. You and 25 other companies are going after that market. So there is a bit of that, but there are also like really innovative people who are thinking of things that we haven't thought of, and having open APIs and being able to constantly bring new technologies into the marketplace. I think there's always going to be a need for that, even as more and more products are being offered directly by Bullhorn.
It's one thing I've really admired about the way you've run, alliances and the way Bullhorn really thinks about, even with, Sourcebreaker and, other examples where you've not just sort of shut out the rest of the market when you've made those acquisitions. There must be in some ways, a tough decision, right? You've made this a big investment, and yet you're still keeping the market, pretty open for others to, still have that best of breed approach to serving agencies. How do you kind of balance out how do you reconcile those things?
Well, we fundamentally believe in customer choice, right? And so that kind of comes back over and over again. If a customer is choosing to use a non-Bullhorn product, even if it's in an area where Bullhorn has a product, there's probably a good reason for that. They're probably looking for something very specific, whether it's geographic or it's functional, whether it's based on what segment they go after. There are reasons why people might want to use a different tool. And we had, a great example of this is we had Onboarding 365, and there was another product in the market called Able, formerly Employee Stream, and they had a product that was better suited for healthcare staffing than Onboarding 365 was. And so we continued to not just allow customers, but actually promote Able into healthcare customers because it was just the right product for that customer. But then we acquired Able. And so now we believe we have, the best onboarding solution out there, but we still have other onboarding products that work in other geographies or on the platforms. So it's really about making sure that our customers have the right tools that they need. We've also been pretty creative in coming up with different levels of partnership. So there might be something that's truly overlapping, and we will work with those customers, support that product, but not promote that product into our customers. So we have like a wide range of different things that we do, but it all comes back to customer choice.
Sure. Amazing. Nina, I want to be respectful of your time. Let's wrap up. I've got a few kind of closing questions. One is, as you mentioned at the top of the podcast, almost 10 years at Bullhorn, 10 years before that in terms of staffing. Is there any kind of way of thinking or piece of advice you've been given over the years that has really kind of you've stuck to and really sort of thought that that's one of your kind of values in working in this business?
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone as a kid is like, I want to grow up to work in the staffing industry. But this is a great industry, both in terms of the impact that we have in helping people to get jobs and to get jobs that are the right jobs for them and really helping to guide people's careers. So for me, I kind of come back to the Simon Sinek question of what is your why? And I'm not a huge Simon Sinek fan, but I do think that this is a helpful exercise to say, well, what is the really fundamental driver for you? And for me, it's using technology to get rid of those parts of the job that really grind you down over time and being able to make the job be more about what the job really should be about. And in staffing, that is getting people into the right job for them and into a career that and a long-term career trajectory that really makes them happy. And so every once in a while, I'll get frustrated about something or I'll, think, what am I doing? And then I realize what I'm doing is bringing technology to market that really helps frontline recruiters do the things that they love and not have to do the things that just grind them down.
It's, I think, when you do step back and I've been in this industry, a much shorter time than you have, last sort of 4 or 5 years, I still often sort of sometimes take a step back and thinking, the industry, staffing, recruiting is, in my view, one of the most important in any economy, right? You're matching talent with open opportunities. And for a hiring manager, even when there's not many roles around, finding the right talent, finding the best talent is still a challenging role. And I think a lot of companies, when they try and do it themselves, quickly find out, actually, I should get a professional to help.
It's hard. And when you think about how much time you're going to spend with that person that was recruited, you want to make sure that it's somebody who is going to be effective in that role and is going to be fun to work with.
Yes. Yeah. Just want to close out in terms of looking forward, in terms of technology or the industry. What's one thing that really excites you about the next 6 or 12 months?
Well, it's a pretty short time frame in this industry, I think. I think that we don't know what the next 6 to 12 months is going to hold. And there's a lot of technology that's evolving and there's a lot of market dynamics that are happening. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I think the time frame that I'm more interested in is what's going to happen over the next 5 years in terms of AI. And how is it really going to transform? I mean, I think in 6 to 9 months, we're still going to have a major adoption barrier.
Sure.
I was just at the GigE conference and SIA did a study asking staffing firms what percentage of the staffing process they thought was going to be automated by AI. And the average came back at 39%, a tiny percentage. And I think in 5 years' time, it's going to look more like 80% AI assisted. And my other big takeaway from the conference is we're not going to call it AI at that point. It's just going to be, how do we do sourcing? How do we do matching? How do we do candidate outreach? How are we doing send outs, how, all of these different stages in the process that used to be so incredibly manual. I mean, I used to do tear sheets by hand, right? Like I would literally write the names of the people that I was going to contact during the day. So I feel like technology has already replaced an enormous number of manual, boring, administrative, grinding tasks, but that in the next 5 years, it's going to be really transformative.
Yeah. That's actually, really, I think, taking a pause there and thinking about that for whether it's software companies serving the industry or agencies themselves, looking at that 5-year horizon. And that's the benefit of going to conferences and talking and looking at the possibilities and where things are going as well. So no, I think that's a big takeaway. Certainly one I'll be thinking about as well. Nina, it's been brilliant. Where can people find you online?
So the easiest thing is LinkedIn or the Bullhorn website. So either way, you can find me. And I like talking to technology companies in this space, and also happy to talk to people who are looking at what their tech stack should look like.
Amazing. Well, Nina, it's been an honor to have you on the Staffing Ring. Really enjoyed our conversation. I'm sure the listeners have got a ton of value, and certainly should be taking notes for the next 5-year plan. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you everyone for listening, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Staffing Ring.